I'm here today on yet another chimney, and I think this is the third of the 4 that we're doing in this 2-week period of time. And this one, it's a little ugly, what can I say? The bottom part was obviously the original work, and then somebody added some top part, and then it looks like it was done twice on top, because inside here it is completely full of all the old debris. We took out a lot of it from the very top. Didn't really have to. I just find it a real shame that people just try to hide and not really do the work. If you're going to tear somebody's house apart, don't pile it in the chimney. Now, a lot of people right now are going, well, what difference does it make? Well, let's look at it a little differently. This is somebody's home, and this is in Southwest Austin. In fact, this is a Westlake address, 78746. These are expensive homes, expensive homes. That's what the people want to own, is the home that costs that much. They can afford it. They deserve to get work that goes with it. Now, let me take this a step further and show you a good comparison that you should always use, guys, people who are watching this that do the work. Let's say somebody is working on your 2-year-old Mercedes. Needs a little bit of work on it. They find some things that need to be redone. They take some parts out, and instead of putting in the old parts, they put in some new parts. But they took the old parts and put under the seat. After all, you're not going to see them underneath the seat. It's just wrong. It is stupid to do it. It's obvious when you talk about a car and putting things under the seat. But if you're doing remodel work and you're throwing boards back in the house and you're putting concrete chunks and stuff into the masonry, that's just really messed up. Think about it. Would you want that done? What we're really talking about is a stone masonry project compared to brick. I've got a video out that shows a lot of how to do a chimney crown on a brick, but we do not address the difference in the stone and the brick. And with the stone, we typically, like this one, this thing is not close to square. We had to replace a few stones in it, and I was surprised the stones that they had used in it. It was just, they're awful. Looked like they were picked up off the ground. I don't know what they were thinking on that. Obviously not a lot of thinking into it. But the real bottom line is not only is it out of square, but it is turned a little bit sideways with the house at a slight angle. You can actually see it from this. So people try to get away with a lot, and they do get away with a lot, but this one's tried to be repaired time and again and again and again, but they never really addressed the problems. They took people's money, they did some work, and they ran. They had one of the tail light warranties, and if you're not familiar with the tail light warranties, it comes out of the 50s when they used to sell siding, and they kept asking, the owner kept asking the salesman, how long is the warranty after he's collecting his final check? How long is the warranty? And he kept stalling and stalling. Finally, he yells as he drives off in his big Cadillac, driving down the long lane driveway. As long as you can see my tail lights. And that's what you usually get with chimney repairs. What a shame. We want to do work that we know we can stand behind. We want to stand behind it, so if you ever have a problem, we resolve that problem if it was related at all to the work that we did. Obviously, a roof can leak above it and things like that. I get that, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's the work that's done around the doggone chimney. So let's talk about how these wire mesh goes on. We use a lath mesh that is what supports the concrete. And we use a 7,500 PSI mix. We're actually using a 5,500 and adding some Portland to it, making it 7,500 PSI mix for the concrete top. It's a self-supporting concrete crown or cap that goes on the chimney. Now, to do that, we use the lath to support the concrete. Beneath that, we're using rebar to support the lath. And on top of the lath, we're using 6x6 reinforcement wire like you would see in a driveway or in the street or any other kind of concrete that's a slab, including house slabs for the most part still use that. So let's take a look at that and how that goes, and then you'll see how we actually do the masonry and how it forms with the stone. But we want to get a big thick edge on the outside because that's the supporting part. That's what's setting on the structural part of the stone. And by making it where it clearly hits the stone, that will help the stone stay in place. Stone itself is going to have some expansion contraction. That's why you use masonry cement, so there's a little flexibility in between the stones and the stones don't break. Now let's take a quick look at the chimney and you'll see what I mean about the lath and the wire mesh and the rebar and how it's used, and then we'll come back later and show you how the concrete is formed with the stone on the outside edge. This is it ready to pour. You can see that we've got the 6x6 reinforcing wire. We've got it kind of bowed up because we want it in the concrete. Now the concrete here is going to be about 4.5 inches. We use this foam insulator, but we wrap it multiple times, spiraling up to the top. So when we take it loose, it's taped up here above where we're going with the concrete. That way you can take that loose and it will spiral out and pull itself out. But by taping it like that around itself, it fits nice and form and fit around this flue tile. Now that's going to leave a nice little gap, so the concrete will not be cracking and cracking and cracking like you've seen on every chimney out there, in Texas anyway, where they poured it up against the flue. There was no room to expand, and so it cracks, 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 cracks. This eliminates that. Now you want to use good concrete. Below here we've got the 3/8 inch rebar, and if it was very big we would use 1/2 inch, but the 3/8 on this short span is quite adequate. And then you have the wire mesh, and this is basically lath, and this lathing mesh is great to support very dry concrete, which is what we're trying to do. Now here you see this sticking up a little more than I want it to, so I'm going to actually make sure that gets bent down before we pour the concrete on it. And then we're going to bring the concrete out even with this jagged edge, but we're going to make it look very good, and you'll see the end result of that before the day is over. Stone chimneys, a lot different than working with brick. Brick is so uniform and straight most of the time that it is relatively easy compared to stone. Now we talked about the actual chimney cap and how you shape it to go with the stone versus putting a form around it, and what you end up with is a much better look. If you put a form around it, at places it's going to look odd. It's going to stick out in places, it's going to cantilever too far, it's going to shadow, looks square when everything else looks very jagged. The two typically don't go well together unless you're trying to make some sort of a statement with that. I would recommend that you just go with the stone. And right now we're going to go up close and look at the chimney cap and how it is finished on the edges on top of the stone. A difference from the way it is where we use a form board and finish the outside edge corner. All right, so here's the chimney cap. You can see that the guys are getting ready to remove the insulator between the new concrete top and the flue liner. Very, very important that you make that space. This is where, and you'll hear me say this time and again on this video, but almost always we see chimneys crack here, 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 and of course the other corner, simply because there's a little bit of expansion and contraction difference in the concrete and the clay flue liner, especially if it gets too hot and expands a little bit. It will crack the concrete. Concrete is a very hard product, unlike masonry. Masonry is a soft product. The problem with masonry here is it expands, contracts, and then it just comes apart. In between the stone, masonry allows the stones to expand, contract, and stay in place by being soft. Big difference in concrete and masonry cement. Got to understand these differences to really be good at this kind of work. Now, notice the contours where the lines go in, the chimney cap goes in. Where the lines go in, the chimney cap goes in. And then from a distance, it looks very natural, like the stonework. You also notice that it's about 3.5, maybe even thicker, 4 inches in the center, three on the outside edge. That's a good thickness for one on top of stone. Now what this concrete on top of stone also does is it holds everything together on the top. The first cushion area is this masonry joint right here. So any stiffness that this creates with this stonework, this will allow them to make that shift and not break the stone. But we like to do them, now this stone stuck out good. And I recommended they not go out to that, but it's just too far. So we chose to leave that in, contour that with this little area here, and it came out really, really well. Yeah, good job, guys. All right, sometimes getting the little spacer strip, the expansion joint, the insulation piece out becomes a challenge where you literally have to dig it out with the sharp little thin screwdriver, which is what he's using. You know, there's all sorts of standards, qualities that you can do. I like to have them tape it off like this. We're using duct tape and just putting it around the corners, putting it around the actual flue. This allows him to push the caulking down in, force it in between, so you know you've got a good feel, a good solid water seal around that chimney flue. Now this is the only place on the chimney that needs to be checked, and I recommend somewhere between 7 and 10 years to check that. And of course you're going to have other things going on the roof, so you can probably check it in between there, but on the minimum I would say every 10 years. You really don't need to even every 5 years, because we have already proven that it's going to last longer than that. Now the key is you want to get it to sticking to the flue, sticking to the concrete, so to support itself in there, and it will do that quite well. This is a good caulk for this. It's pretty sticky. It will really seal to things. It will really stay long term, and it is heat resistant because it's actually a fire barrier. And this is a really good product for this. There's a gray one, but it is really not made for this use. And I kind of wish that they had one that was gray. The other one is a little too reddish, and it shows up more than the terracotta clay tile. But you want to put this in there, and then you want to tool it. Tool it means, you know, using a putty knife, or in this case, we like it to be round, so you just use your thumb or finger, or you can use a round tool of sorts. But you want to tool that, pushing that in once you get enough caulk in place. And what that does is it assures that you've got a watertight seal against where you really want the seal. It also makes it smooth, but it's also the reason that we use the tape. So while it's still wet, you can pull the tape off and get a very, very good seal. Now it's going to take him a while to get around this, so we'll come back at this end as he's taking the tape off and show you what we mean. Okay, so here all he's doing is removing the tape, and I want you to look at how clean that line is when you tape it like that. And of course it gave him the ability to really push it in, really force the caulk into the space where it goes, and then you just get it clean as you go. And you have a nice looking caulked line, and I personally like that, even though hardly anybody but the birds are going to see that. Here's the deal. If you get sloppy on some of your work, when do you not be sloppy? When is it okay to be sloppy? My contention is if you allow guys to be sloppy, they will be sloppy, and they will be sloppy at a time you don't want them to. So always be aware of that. His tape came loose there. Concrete may have been a little dusty. It wasn't holding real good. And yet the line came out very, very good there. Very nice, very nice. Just a little bit of caulk right here on this edge. We'll get that off for him. And all is good. I like that. Good job, good job.